It was December 26th, the day after Christmas, and I was watching the Yeeps Hide and Seek wishlist giveaway livestream hosted by the developers themselves. They were giving out free rewards to the Yeeps community, but in this livestream they also did a little Q&A. And something within this developer Q&A really piqued my interest when the developers said this.
Need that couch anyways. But if you notice the sides of this house here, we tried to build this as accurately as we could to the sides of the Yeep. So if a Yeep is, as big as a Yeep is relative to this house, maybe you guys can do the math and figure out how big the Yeeps are in real life.
And at the time, this of course got me wondering, what is the size of a Yeep? And led to even more questions. That was, though, until they announced the next reward, and I completely forgot about it. Until now. So, we first need to get a starting point, something that we can absolutely know the height of in-game is correct, so we can compare everything else to that object. Most people would say that the Yeeps plushie is the perfect solution, since we have a real version that we can measure, but the devs actually knocked this idea in their livestream when they said,
That being said, if there is a plushie and the plushie is to scale, does that imply a certain size of...
The plushie complicates things, all right? I'm going to keep it honest with you guys. So,
So, now we're again left with trying to find a starting place. Well, the developers actually gave us the perfect starting point, saying to look at blue house and green house to compare the heights.
the plush. But if you want to know the canon lore of the Yeep scale, look at the houses of greenhouse and blue house.
So, now we have the perfect starting point to begin this investigation. So now we're going to need something that's inside of blue or green house that we can measure off of. And I thought the best choice would be the doorway, since most doorways are standardized nowadays, and the doorways are the same height in both blue and green house. So now with that, the average household doorway height is 80 inches, or 203.2 centimeters. And I actually tested this with my own door, and I got the same results. Because the door height is 80 inches, and that the in-game door height is 10 blocks tall, we can divide 80 by 10 and get each individual block as 8 inches tall. With that singular measurement, that is the beginning to measuring the entirety of the game. So before we get too crazy, let's start with, of course, the star of this entire show, the Yeep itself, and try to figure out its height. To get this measurement, I lined up a Yeep against 2 blocks and tried to line up the camera straight onto the face of the Yeep. And with multiple different shots, I was able to approximate a Yeep to be about 1.4 blocks tall. And if we do some multiplication to the size of a block, you can find that a Yeep is actually 11.2 inches, or about 28.4 centimeters tall in real life, which is about the height of a foot-long ruler, but just like 0.8 inches shorter. I don't know, someone in the comments give a better comparison. I don't really know what would be 11.2 inches tall. This height is actually much different though from the Yeep plushie that only comes in around 7 inches. So if anyone wants to make a plushie that is to scale, here are your measurements. So, with the Yeep finished, that had me thinking bigger. How big is a Yeep's world? And since it is 80 by 80 blocks, again, just multiply it by 8, and you get it as 53.3 by 58.3 feet across, and since the build limit's 72 blocks, that would be 48 feet tall. So bam, just like that, we can now measure basically anything in-game. This video's over, and I can live on with my life satisfied that I found the measurements. That would be the ideal response to finding this information. But me being me, I just had to dig deeper. And deeper did I dig. So my next thought was, how much cotton do Yeeps actually store? Like, I know 5,000, but how much is 5,000 cotton? So I wanted to see how many blocks a Yeep could pull out of themselves. But you would think, okay, 1 block is 75 cotton, so 5,000 divided by 75, and bam, you can figure out that a Yeep holds 66 blocks. And you would be right, except that actually isn't the case, because the bigger pillow blocks are, the cheaper they are to place per block. Let me explain. So, the 1x1 pillow block costs 75 cotton to place, and the 2x2 costs 150. So, since the 1x1 consists of only a single block that costs 75, that means it costs 75 cotton per block to place. Makes sense. So, with that logic, the 2x2 pillow block that takes up 4 blocks of space would cost 75 times 4 blocks, 300 cotton. But, like I just said, the 2x2 costs only 150 cotton, half the price. This is a trend that actually continues with the pillow blocks, where the larger they are, the less cotton they cost per block, all the way up to the 4x4, which costs only 18.75 cotton per block, making the 1x1 block, which is with its 75 cotton per block, seem like a total ripoff. So if a Yeep was to place an entire inventory of nothing but 4x4 blocks, they would end up placing 16, which would add up to 256 total blocks, with 200 cotton left. So with that, they could place another 2x4, totaling to a final total of 264 blocks. If a Yeep is about 1.4 blocks tall, that is 188 times their own size.
What?
Well, then I was wondering how much space is actually inside of a Yeep. And that shouldn't have been too hard because the developers in their Discord server gave the community an official 3D model of the Yeep. So all I had to do was port it into a 3D modeling software, and bam, I would have the volume of a Yeep. So I ported it into the CAD software Onshape, and for some unknown reason, Onshape could not find the volume. So after re-exporting, re-upload, a Blender plugin, and a lot of miscalculations, after a week of this simple task, I finally found the volume of a Yeep as in 201.38 inches cubed. So, now with the volume of a Yeep, we have to find the volume of each individual block. So, like I said before, each block is 8 inches tall. So, all we have to do is take 8 times 8 times 8, or 8 cubed, which led me to discover the volume as 512 inches cubed. If something sounds wrong here, it did to me too. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. So the volume of a Yeep, like I said, is 201 inches cubed, and the volume of a cube in game is 512 inches cubed. So that means a Yeep doesn't even have the capacity to hold half of a block. I think there are two different explanations for why this could happen. The first one is that cotton can be expanded and condensed, so you can change the densities depending on how much you want to squish together. The second one is that I don't think this would have ever crossed the developer's mind when they're making this. But let's assume that this was all completely realistic and that Yeeps really could condense that much cotton. How much would they actually be condensing? So, going even deeper into this rabbit hole, I wanted to find the density of cotton to know how much it could be condensed. And in my research, I found the density of a cotton bale when in industrial transport. And lucky for us, there is an actual cotton bale in game. And I don't know about you, but I greatly see the resemblance between the two. So what I found is that in transport, a bale of cotton can have a density between 368 kilograms per meter cubed and 450 kilograms per cubic meter. And I decided to go with the upper half just because of how much stuffing Yeeps have in them. So if we do a quick conversion with the density, and then multiply that by the volume of a block, then a cotton bale in Yeeps must weigh 8.32 pounds. And knowing that a Yeep can hold 2.5 cotton bales, again, quick multiplication, we can find that a Yeep weighs about 20.81 pounds or 9.44 kilograms. Again, I don't have a good comparison, but this is a lot for stuffed animals because this would be about like 2 10-pound bowling balls of weight, which leaves us with the density of a Yeep being 0.1033 pounds per cubic inch or 2,859.33 kilograms per cubic meter. Now, finally, after all of this, we can find the weight of any cotton block because since Yeeps weigh 20.81 pounds at full cotton, we can divide that by 5,000, which would give us 0.00416 pounds. So, if we multiply that number by the cost of any item in cotton, you should be able to get the weight of any item in Yeeps. So, now it's time for a 30-second speed round of a bunch of measurements. Starter house is 18 feet from floor to roof. The playground tower is 32.7 feet. A bat weighs 2.08 pounds. A turret weighs 8.32 pounds. The tower in Rave Cave is 22 feet. The boats in Boat Battle from tip to tip is 28.7 feet long. The bridge in Red vs. Blue is 10.7 feet. The child is approximately 2.8 inches tall in-game. Pellet guns are about 1.25 pounds along with grapplers. Finally, freeze gloves weigh 2.08, same as the bat. So here is a quick and final recap of a Yeep. It has 5,000 HP, is 0 feet 11.2 inches, and weighs 20.81 pounds, and has a density of 0.1033 pounds per cubic inch. It's a normal and creative type, and its main attacks are bat, sniper, and build fort. It has no retreat cost because Yeeps don't sleep, and has a weakness to homing rockets. If you've ever wondered what the density of Yeep is, you heard it here. Until next time though, I would like to thank you for watching and remind you to keep learning. See ya!